Rain misted through the high canopy fog of Elara, 7, clinging to leaves like condensation on glass. Dr. Elara Voss adjusted the strap of her field pack, squinting through the green-gray haze as she moved deeper into the moss-laden woodlands. Her boots sank slightly into the saturated earth with each step. Elara, 7 was untamed, a planet half-wild, half-willing to welcome humans, if they learned to tread lightly. Elara knew that better than anyone. A xenobiologist with a specialty in alien ecology, she had been stationed alone for 6 months at Outpost Elara, a self-sustaining dome nestled near the banks of the Varen River. Officially, she was there to observe life forms in the outer riparian zones. Unofficially, she was chasing a theory, the whispered myth of an undocumented predator species, possibly sentient, glimpsed only in flickers by malfunctioning drones and jittery settlers. Today it started quietly enough. She'd gone out to install a sensor buoy downstream, aiming to study electromagnetic dissonance that often disrupted her readings. But as she neared the river's bend, the air grew different, thicker, tense. The ambient sounds, clicking insects, the occasional hiss of arboreal gliders, fell silent. Then she heard it, a sharp, high-pitched cry, like an animal's, but too layered, too intentional. It wasn't just pain, it was panic. Elara broke into a jog. Her breath quickened. She knew enough not to run blindly in alien terrain, but something in the sound burrowed under her skin, compelling her forward. She reached the riverbank just as the sound came again, weaker this time, drawn out like a child's whimper. There, caught between a tangle of roots and rocks, a small creature thrashed in the water. It had the shape of a wolf pup, but not one bred on earth. Its fur, though soaked, shimmered faintly with silver-blue iridescence. Its eyes, too large for its head, locked onto hers with startling clarity. Without thinking, Elara dropped her gear and plunged into the water. The current was stronger than it looked, tugging at her legs as she waded forward. Cold soaked through her clothes, her breath caught, but she pressed on. The pup yelped again, struggling against the rocks pinning one of its hind legs. She reached it and wrapped her arms around its trembling body, fingers fumbling to dislodge the snare of root fibers. It didn't resist. It only stared at her, wide-eyed, whimpering softly, as if waiting to see what kind of creature she would choose to be. With a hard pull, she freed its leg and turned back toward the shore, holding the pup tightly to her chest. It was heavier than it looked, its frame denser, warmer. As she staggered back onto the bank, it clung to her literally. Tiny digits at the base of its forelimbs gripped her shirt like hands. Drenched and shivering, Elara sat in the wet grass, cradling it. Its breathing was shallow but steady. She opened a thermal blanket from her pack, wrapping it around them both. "What in the stars are you?" she murmured, brushing wet fur from its face. The pup tilted its head, blinking slowly, as if trying to decipher the question. Back at the outpost, Elara laid the pup on a padded medical cot beside her workstation. She scanned it with a handheld analyzer. The results were baffling. Biometric signatures hovered in the range of mammalian. But there were anomalies. A neural cluster that extended along the spine, light-emitting cells embedded in the dermis, and a fluctuating electromagnetic field that disrupted the scanner every few seconds. She documented everything: photos, samples from its fur, even a saliva swab when it licked her arm. Despite her scientific rigor, she couldn't ignore the feeling that she was being watched. Not by security cams or base sensors, but by the pup itself. It tracked her as she moved, not with skittishness, but with calm intensity. When she sat near it, it reached out with a paw, then slowly placed it on her hand. She didn't move. A soft pulse of warmth radiated from the touch. She wasn't sure if it was physical or imagined. I should be afraid, she whispered. But I'm not. That night, she didn't sleep much. She left the cot beside her own and dozed fitfully, boots still on. At some point, the pup crept into the bed beside her, curling up against her stomach with a quiet huff. She didn't have the heart to push it away. At dawn, a deep howl echoed across the valley, long, mournful, and close. Elara sat up, pulse spiking. The pup jerked awake, ears flicking, then buried its head against her chest. She checked the external sensors, nothing unusual. But the perimeter motion detectors glitched just as the howl sounded again. A flicker of movement appeared near the tree line, too brief to confirm. She frowned, opening the comms log to record her observations, but the words felt hollow. How could she explain this to the Institute? That she'd rescued an alien wolf cub with telepathic eyes? That she now slept with it in her arms and feared something bigger was watching? Instead, she opened a new file and began a personal log. Day 1 with the subject, possibly juvenile. Displays rapid adaptability. Limited vocalizations. Strong observational behavior. No aggression. Seems to have bonded with me. Possibly empathic. Possibly intelligent. The pup stirred and let out a quiet, rising trill. It sounded like a question. Still haven't named you, Elara said, leaning down. You'll need one. She reached for the old leather-bound field journal she'd brought from Earth, its corners worn soft by years of travel. Inside was a list of names, words in old Terran dialect she found beautiful. One caught her eye. Kale. Ancient, meaning uncertain. It had been used for seekers, for messengers. She tried aloud. Kale. The pup lifted its head and looked at her, truly looked. Its eyes shimmered faintly, and something shifted in the air between them. It wasn't speech. It wasn't sound, but a quiet impression filled her mind. Recognition. Belonging. She exhaled, her throat tight. Kale, she whispered again. Is that you? The room seemed to hum with quiet energy. A connection formed, invisible yet undeniable. She didn't know if she was imagining it, if isolation had finally cracked her mind, but she didn't feel alone anymore. Outside, the wind changed direction. Leaves rustled in the distance. Another howl, this one deeper, resonated from the forest. Then another, and another. Kale whimpered. His ears lowered, and he pressed against her, trembling. Elara stood, walking slowly to the window. The tree leaves swayed in the breeze, but nothing moved that she could see. Still, the feeling returned, that weight of unseen eyes tracking her every movement. Behind her, Kale let out a soft, rising note that seemed to vibrate against her spine. She turned back, heart pounding. He was standing now, unsteady but upright, staring past her toward the forest. His tail curled low, but his posture wasn't fearful. It was expectant. Something was coming. Elara felt it too, not just through sound, but in her chest, rising pressure like the moment before a storm breaks. She stepped back, her gaze flicking between Kale and the trees beyond the dome's edge. Who are you? She asked again, softer this time. Kale didn't answer. He didn't have to. By the second day, Kale was no longer merely recovering. He was adapting. Elara watched him from the lab console as he navigated the outpost's living quarters with eerie purpose. He sniffed the air vents, touched the edges of control panels with those clawed digits, and once paused to watch a looping holographic projection of Terran wolves she had recorded months ago. He tilted his head, ears twitching, then turned his eyes to her with an expression that could only be called curious. There was no clumsiness in his movement, no fear. Every action was measured, as if he were not exploring for the first time, but reacquainting himself with a language long forgotten. Elara revised her notes. Subject Kale, motor coordination at levels far exceeding expected development. displays signs of tool awareness. Neural scans unstable but active. As she dictated, Kale turned and patted over. He settled by her feet, eyes half-lidded, tail curled around his side. It had become a routine. He followed her through the outpost like a shadow, silent and observant. His presence was comforting, but it brought with it a constant sense of being watched. Not only by Kale, but through him. She caught herself whispering to him sometimes, not out of affection, but because silence in his company felt like a missed opportunity. When she ran tests, he watched the data stream. When she cooked, he sat by the heating element and cocked his head at the steam. At night, he slept pressed against her back, radiating a warmth that lulled her into dreamless sleep. But then the dreams began. At first, they were fragmented impressions, shapes weaving through shadowed forests, silvery eyes glinting beneath twin moons. Then they grew more coherent. She ran the dreams on all fours, her senses sharpened. She could feel her pack around her, silent, swift, instinctively united. The dream Elara didn't think in words. She felt in pulses, hunger, joy, fear, belonging. The cold bite of wind against her tongue, the thrum of paws against earth. She woke breathless, heart racing, a growl still half-formed in her throat. After the fourth such dream, she scanned Kale's sleeping body with the portable neural monitor. Spikes of activity mirrored her own REM cycles almost exactly. That couldn't be coincidence. The thought unnerved her. Could he be broadcasting those dreams? Was he showing her something? Or was she somehow slipping into his mind? She began speaking to him directly about the dreams. He would only watch her, sometimes blinking slowly, sometimes chirping a low note from deep in his throat. Once, when she mentioned the scent of rain in the dreams, Kale moved toward the door and sat there, waiting, as if expecting her to open it. She did. Outside, the forest was cool and still. The light was soft, filtered through the late afternoon haze. Kale walked ahead, cautious but not afraid. She followed. They moved through ferns and over knotted roots until they reached a shallow rise overlooking the river. Kale stopped there and sat, eyes scanning the horizon. Elara sat beside him, unsure why they'd come. Then she heard it again, a low hum, deep and resonant, rolling through the trees like distant thunder. Kale didn't react, not fearfully. Instead, he leaned against her. It wasn't a sound in the air. It was inside her. Emotion surged through her chest. Not her own, but foreign and layered. A cascade of impressions. Kale drowning, his terror, the feel of her arms lifting him from water. Relief, recognition, trust, and something else, many minds reaching out. Distant, uncertain, but attentive. She gasped and stumbled to her feet, the sensation dissipating like mist. Kale remained seated, watching her with calm intensity. Back at the outpost, she struggled to document the experience. Words failed her. Her logbook became a blur of phrases, telepathic resonance, shared dream state, cross-species imprint. She scratched out more than she wrote. There were no protocols for this. The next night, the dreams came again, but this time, she wasn't alone in the forest. Dark figures moved beside her, flanking her. Not human, not entirely wolf. Tall, lithe, with fur that shimmered like moonlight and eyes that burned silver. One turned to look at her, and in its gaze she felt recognition. Not of her as Elara, the scientist, but as something accepted. She woke just before dawn, shivering despite the warmth of the cot. Kale sat at the foot of the bed, staring out the window. The perimeter sensors pinged. A flicker of motion near the tree line. Then another. Her console flashed, but failed to resolve the images. It wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate interference. She activated the security drones. They buzzed to life and hovered toward the coordinates. Just before they reached the edge of the forest, the feed cut to static. No sound, no alert, just silence. Cale didn't react. Or rather, he didn't seem alarmed. He simply walked to the door and sat again, as if waiting. Elara crouched beside him. "Something's out there," she whispered. He turned to her and leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers. And in that moment, the sensation returned. It was stronger this time, a chorus of emotional resonance flowing through her mind. Awareness, movement, intent, not hostile but cautious. They knew she was here. They had seen her take Cale. They had seen her save him. And they were deciding what to do next. Cale pulled back and padded to the center of the room, curling up and closing his eyes as if nothing had happened. Elara didn't sleep. The next day, she took Cale out to the clearing again. This time, she brought her camera drone, hovering quietly overhead. She watched Cale sniff the air, then lift his head in a posture of listening. Minutes passed. Then he howled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't feral. It was something else, measured, melodic. It rose in tone, then fell like a call across an infinite distance. She waited. A few seconds later, from somewhere beyond the trees, a reply came. Low, deep, multivocal. Cale sat still, tail brushing the grass. The hairs on Elara's neck rose. She reviewed the drone footage that evening. The waveform of the return howl defied standard acoustic patterns. It resonated across more than audio bands. Her equipment registered fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, subtle gravitational warps, even temperature shifts. It was communication, but not only through sound. That night, she found Cale sitting on the desk, staring at the old map of Elara 7 she had pinned to the wall months ago. His paw rested near a cluster of dark markings, uncharted forest valleys, never explored. She'd always assumed those areas were rich in magnetic ore, hence the signal distortion. Now, she wasn't sure. She took the hint. The next morning, she began preparing for a trek. Cale stayed close, his presence more insistent. When she hesitated at packing her pulse pistol, he looked at her, then pawed the side of her boot softly. Not aggression, she thought. Caution. By evening, as she sat beside the flickering light of her console, another sound rang through the outpost. Closer now. A howl. Not one, but several. Layered and distant, but no longer hesitant. Cale stood. His fur bristled slightly, but not with fear. His ears perked, his gaze fixed on the door. Elara followed it, heart drumming. They were coming. The pack. And she wasn't sure whether they were arriving to greet her, or to decide what she truly was. The forest was darker than Elara remembered, not because of the fading light, but because of the silence. She had expected birdsong, the rustle of small creatures, the ambient whisper of wind threading through branches. Instead, there was a breathless stillness, as if the forest itself waited. Cale walked ahead, each paw placed deliberately, his movements as fluid as water. Elara followed, pulse thudding behind her ribs, one hand resting near her sidearm. Not out of distrust toward Cale, but because instinct told her this journey was about more than discovery. This was something ancient, something sacred. They had traveled 2 hours southeast of the outpost, skirting rocky ridges and weaving through tall ferns until they reached a hollow choked with mist. The scanner she brought failed to map the terrain beyond a few meters. The drone wouldn't fly here. Its gyros failed seconds after liftoff, grounding it like a stone. Electromagnetic interference wasn't a phenomenon anymore. It was a threshold. Cale paused at the lip of a narrow path overhung with moss and pale vines. He turned to her, eyes gleaming silver green in the dimness. She nodded once. They moved forward together. Every step carried them deeper into shadow. Her boots crunched softly on damp soil. A low resonance hummed at the edge of hearing, like wind, but with rhythm. Her thoughts felt thickened, weighed with unseen presence. The dream impressions she had shared with Kale now pressed gently at the corners of her consciousness. Flickers of light in blackness, half-formed words shaped in emotion. Then the path widened. The glade opened like a wound in the earth. Trees arched around it in a natural cathedral, their trunks warped and impossibly tall. Light filtered through cracks in the canopy above, silver and blue, falling like dust on stone. They were waiting. A half-circle of figures stood at the glade's far edge, tall, furred, and upright. Neither fully quadruped nor biped. Their limbs moved with quiet precision. Their bodies shimmered faintly, as if moonlight clung to them. Their eyes glowed. Not menacing, not vacant, aware. Present. Kale stopped beside Elara and lifted his head. One of the figures stepped forward. Taller than the others, its fur streaked with darker tones. It exuded something more than command. Elara felt it immediately. Age, memory, sorrow. The air rippled. No sound passed between them, yet something reached out. Images. Not like the dreams. These were clearer. She saw Kale, younger, among the pack. Curiosity led him too close to the river. A sudden flood. Pain. Terror. The others could not reach him. They watched him vanish beneath the current. Helpless. Then her. Plunging into the water. Lifting him free. Shelter. Warmth. Trust. The next image. Her face, viewed through Kale's memory. Her hands. Her voice. Another ripple. This time layered emotions. Awe. Conflict. Caution. She realized what they were sharing, what they were asking. Why? Elara stepped forward slowly, not to challenge, but to speak. She didn't know if words would matter. Still, she tried. He was alone, drowning. I couldn't leave him. Silence. Then an answering wave, pulsing through her chest like a second heartbeat. Not disapproval, not yet understanding. She had acted against expectation. Her motives weren't clear to them. To them, every action came from harmony or survival. No wasted gesture. No moral abstractions. Mercy they sensed, but it baffled them. The elder turned to Kale. Their minds touched. Elara felt the bond but could not see its shape. Then the elder knelt and pressed a clawed hand to the soil. Kale stepped forward and mirrored the gesture. Elara hesitated. Then, slowly, she knelt as well and placed her palm beside theirs. The ground vibrated. Heat pulsed upward through her skin, not painful, but electric. Her vision swam. Colors deepened. Greens turned iridescent. The air thickened with unseen patterns. Language bloomed, not in sound but in meaning. You are not us. You do not belong. Yet one of ours chose you, and you chose in return. The thought was not singular. It came from many voices threaded together into one awareness. To bond with one of the pack is to be seen. To see in turn. Your kind breaks what it does not understand. Do you seek to break this? Elara met the elder's gaze. No, she said aloud, voice trembling. I want to understand. The silence that followed felt endless. Her hand tingled where it touched the ground. She held her breath. Then Kale howled. Not loud, but long, mournful, rising in harmonic layers. One by one, the others joined him, their tones weaving into a sound more symphony than song. It echoed through the glade, vibrating in her ribs, down into the soil, up into the branches. Something inside her broke, or perhaps it opened. Tears streamed from her eyes, unbidden. She saw not just Kale's memories, but their collective history. The pack's exile, the loss of others like them, the fear of humans, the grief of watching their world shrink while others try to claim it. yet also the memory of light, Kale's memory of her. A flicker of something rare, something new. When the howling ceased, the elder approached and pressed his forehead gently against Kale's. Then, he turned to Elara. He chose you. That choice remains. The others parted, forming a path deeper into the glade. At the center, a ring of stones encircled a small basin filled with clear water. Without words, she understood. It was an invitation. Kale moved to her side, nudging her hand. She stood guided by instinct now. As they stepped into the circle, the others watched in silence. Elara knelt before the basin and looked into the water. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, weathered face, streaks of silver in her dark hair. But beside her, Kale's image shimmered, and around them, faint outlines of the others flickered like starlight onto the surface. She reached out and touched the water. A ripple spread outward. The air shifted. In that moment, she felt Kale's thoughts more clearly than ever. His longing, his loneliness, his hope. He had chosen her not because she saved him, but because something in her called to something in him. Not instinct, not accident, recognition. When she withdrew her hand, the water calmed, and the elder nodded once. The trial was complete. The pack began to move, dispersing into the woods like mist. No words were spoken. None were needed. But the air no longer felt heavy with judgment. There was space now. Space for trust. Kale remained beside her, tail swishing once before curling lightly around her leg. They began the walk back under the early light of the moons. The path behind them marked not by footprints but by the memory of shared silence. Elara didn't speak until the outpost came into view. They didn't just accept me, she murmured. They made a place. Kale gave a soft huff of agreement. She turned to look at him. But what happens next? Kale's ears flicked toward the trees. And then she understood. The pack had seen her, but others would come. Not with curiosity, with conquest. And when they did, the bond she and Kale had forged would be the only bridge between two worlds drifting closer toward collision. The path had opened, but it would not remain open forever. The first survey drone arrived 3 days later, sleek and silent, humming like an insect against the canopy. Elara spotted it just before dawn, its lights sweeping in slow arcs, scanning the terrain where the glade lay hidden beneath layers of misdirection, natural and deliberate. The pack had disappeared back into the forest after the ritual, but Kale remained. And now, the world beyond the outpost had caught the scent. She logged the drone's presence, intentionally vague in her report. No anomalies detected. Mild weather interference. She encrypted the footage, locking it behind an access protocol she didn't share with the central system. Kale stood beside her the entire time, watching the sky. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked, not expecting an answer. But his head lowered slightly, a gesture that didn't resemble submission, more like mourning. By midday, the outpost received a transmission from the Terran Exploration and Expansion Directorate. Polite, official, and cold. A new team would be arriving within the week to continue habitat assessment. They requested her to prepare a full debrief and transfer of biological samples, particularly the one referred to in her logs as Kale. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked out into the woods with Kale trailing behind, silent and alert. Once beyond the sensor perimeter, she sat on a rock and stared at the ground, hands trembling. "They'll want to cut you open," she whispered. "Study your tissue, your brain, your bones. They won't see the songs or the memories. Just data." Kale pressed his nose to her shoulder, a soft rumble in his chest. That night, her dreams were not shared. They were silent, void, her mind echoing with a terrible emptiness she hadn't known since before Kale arrived. When she woke, Her throat was sore from choking back a scream. She began packing immediately. Not to flee, not yet, but to prepare. Cale helped in his own way. He brought her tools, her satchel, a canister of nutrient packs. He waited patiently while she copied her notes to analog storage, small data cores that couldn't be traced by simple surveillance sweeps. She buried one beneath a cairn near the edge of the glade, another beneath the outpost comms tower. The third she hid in the riverbank, where Cale had nearly drowned. "Don't want to know what happened here," she said. "One day, but it won't be them who gets to decide." Cale stood over the final cache, ears pricked, gaze sharp. She knew then. He understood everything. The arrival came at midday. A heavy shuttle, engines whining, scorched the landing zone in a flurry of dust and pressure. The survey team wore glossy black field suits, visors mirrored, each one equipped with advanced biometric scanners and holstered pulse weapons they didn't try to hide. They were polite to her face, smiling, professional, and utterly invasive. They scanned every surface, asked questions wrapped in pleasantries. They avoided directly referencing Cale, but their eyes drifted constantly toward the corners where he kept out of sight. He didn't approach them. He didn't flee. He simply watched, silent and still. That night, Elara received a message on a private channel, one not meant for her to access. It was a directive. Relocate the specimen to containment. Sedate if necessary. We will extract for transport in 48 hours. She sat in silence for a long time. When Cale came to her, she didn't speak. She placed her hand gently on his fur and closed her eyes. "I won't let them take you." The next day, she initiated a false weather alert. Localized electrical storm detected. The system triggered temporary lockdown protocols, halting outbound communications. It bought her time. She walked into the forest with Cale once more, this time heading farther than ever before. Past the glade, past the places even she had never mapped. He guided her, weaving between trees and ravines with unerring instinct. At sunset, they arrived at a grove ringed by stone markers. Here, the pack waited, not in hostility, but readiness. The elders stepped forward again. This time, the air did not ripple with questions. They had sensed what she had done, what she had risked. She knelt and opened her satchel. From it, she retrieved the smallest data core, the one containing Cale's complete physiological readings, emotional resonance logs, and her full personal account. "I want to give this to you," she said. "It's your story, not ours to keep." The elder touched the core lightly with one claw, then passed it to another, a younger one, eyes bright with comprehension. It disappeared into a pouch woven from fiber and leaf. Cale turned to her then. She had known it was coming, but the knowing didn't lessen the ache. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw gratitude, regret, love, not human love, not possessive or spoken, but real all the same. He walked toward the others. They closed around him, not as jailers, but as kin. She remained still as the pack vanished into the forest once more, their shapes dissolving into shadow. When she returned to the outpost, she deleted all direct references to Cale from her logs. She rewrote the final incident report. Specimen fled into deep terrain during inclement weather. Presumed deceased or irrecoverable. No threat indicators observed. Recommend ceasing active pursuit due to high ecological disruption risk. The shuttle departed the next morning, frustrated but powerless to challenge the official report. The site was declared non-viable for settlement, citing unstable geologic structures and insufficient resource density. It will be left alone for now. Weeks passed. The forest grew quiet again, but not empty. Elara remained, maintaining the outpost on paper, but in truth living on its edges. Her communications to Earth became less frequent. Her official updates shorter. She took long walks alone, sometimes to the glade, sometimes beyond. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she sat beside the river, fingers skimming the surface. She wasn't waiting. She had stopped expecting. But she felt him before she saw him. Kill stepped from the trees, leaner now, taller, his form more upright than before. Not entirely quadrupedal, not fully bipedal either, somewhere in between. Evolution in motion. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She smiled. He lay beside her, and they watched the stars appear between branches. A silence settled, familiar and unbroken. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Something vast stirred within her. Not a memory, not a message, but an understanding. This was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of another.